Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Trinity College. And in this year of Brexit, it's probably important to note that this was the last room in Ireland where King George VI was toasted. So welcome to the very strange world of Trinity. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what happened in the survey and in the Irish economy. Nafu is going to tell you about the psychological contract and about millennials and the difficulties of managing millennials, some aspects of which you already know as people involved in recruitment. And then Brian Lucy will basically give you the rundown of what he sees as the future of the Irish economy and also what's going to be happening over the next few months. And they'll probably scare you. So for those of you that haven't made your coffees into Irish coffees, Brian definitely will make you do that. So I'm the good cop in this conversation. So what do we know? Well, we know that the Irish economy is improving at the moment. We know that it's growing. The PMI figures so far are very positive. The consumer sentiment figures have been weak, but they have recovered. The big question right now is what's going to happen as a result of the exchange rate changes that have taken place. So over the past few months, we've seen a shift downwards of the exchange rate relative to the euro of about 17%. That's really hurting a lot of exporters from Ireland into the UK. Now, on top of that, we then have the situation that over the last week, we've seen that shift to 30%. That's bounced back a little bit, but we really don't know what's going to happen with that exchange rate over time. That's a challenge for you as export-led firms in Ireland. And most of the people that responded to this survey are export-led firms. The FDI sector employs about 187,000 people. That's out of a labor force in employment of roughly 2.2 million. So it's a relatively small sector, but most of our value added in this economy, over 50%, comes from that small sliver of FDI orientated firms. On top of that, the rest of the Irish domestic firms, those which are engaged in exports, are the ones that really create the value in the Irish economy. There's a very small pool of non-exporting firms and non-research and development active firms, but for the most part, they have shrunk or they have shut down. And even though there's a strong employment multiplier in the agri-food sector, the one that's been most damaged so far by the Brexit event, that sector itself is one which is relatively small in terms of numbers of overall employment, about 6% of the economy. So there's a lot of positive things out there, so don't give in to the fear that's been mentioned on RTE. On top of that, there are other aspects to think about. And the one that's most notable is housing. We saw over the Christmas period the situation in Apollo House. We know that at the moment that the policy of the Minister for Housing is to develop over 25,000 new units over the next 4 years. That's an ambitious target, especially since roughly 12,000 units are declared obsolete or dilapidated, according to the CSO, every single year. So we're actually running to almost stand still. So within the survey, we found a few interesting things. We found about a fifth of the respondents on the employee side are actually spending more than what is considered affordable for rent. That means a third of post-tax income. On top of that, even though a lot of these people are to the pin of their collar trying to pay their rent, they won't ask you for a raise. What they will ask you for a raise for, over 2/3 will ask you for a raise for, is to get a mortgage. So mortgages and mortgage rules are very important to employees, and they will go to employers looking for a raise. They will relocate jobs in order to get a better job to afford a mortgage, and they will relocate their home place in order to afford a cheaper house. And from the point of view of employers, already the ICT industry has said that this is a significant problem for their recruitment. So the broken housing market, the broken property market in Ireland, which has been broken for a very long time, this is not new, is having knock-on effects for normal employees and normal employers. So this is an economy-wide problem that needs to be addressed as a priority, especially since Ireland has the opportunity to acquire lots of firms from the UK as the UK hard Brexit and its removal from the customs union becomes a reality. England's disadvantage is Ireland's opportunity, and you have to keep saying that to yourself right now. But if we do not have the groundwork done already, if we don't have the possibility of even accommodating these new employees and these new firms, well, then we're going to lose even before we start. And that's an important point that's come out front and center in this survey. A few other interesting things came out as well. Taxes. So about 58% of firms found taxation to be a problem. Why is that? When you look at even the studies conducted by the Department of Finance here in Dublin, they find that Ireland's tax rate at the higher level is more punitive than even the French tax rates. That's surprising to hear because you're constantly told Ireland is a low tax economy, Ireland is an economy which is enterprise orientated, but when you look at the design of our tax base, it is very narrow. And as you move up the income ladder, especially for the individuals who are respondents to this survey in law, ICT, financial services, people who are paid and paid well, the incidence of taxation on them rises to above 60% very quickly, at basically 2.5 times median income, which means that it's better off to live in Paris from a taxation point of view. And that's a surprising finding. And it's already being shown by industries having difficulty recruiting people into Ireland when they look at this situation of taxation. On top of that, we then have to look at the issue of pensions. So most people here don't necessarily think about pensions, but there's a crucial aspect of the Irish public policy mix that is front and center with accommodation and pensions. The old age pension is designed for an individual that owns their house. It's not designed for an individual that rents their house. Therefore, people that do not have alternative sources of income after their earning cycle will have difficulty surviving into the future. And at the moment, only 56% of respondents have pensions. And when you look into a sector-by-sector level, that drops all the way down to less than a third in the legal profession. In fact, the lawyers are very interesting people. They're the least concerned about Brexit, but they're also the people who are the most impoverished due to rent, those who have the least amount of pension security, but they're also the people that are the least worried about getting a raise or changing their jobs. So the lawyers are a unique group of individuals within this survey, whereas people in ICT and accountancy and financial services are all very sensitive to these components. In fact, one of the surprising results is that for those who are in ICT, the number one perquisite that they are looking for is healthcare. 58% will make a decision on employment on the basis of healthcare. That's something which is a surprising fact, because when you look at the Irish economy and you look at the way that Ireland talks about healthcare, people don't necessarily think about health insurance as being a major perk of employment. But it is a perk that is important to employees in the ICT sector. And as the insurance industry in Ireland continues to go through more and more difficulties and premiums increase, it's probably going to become more of a concern to other employees. So those are some of the key sectoral reflections. But let's think about Brexit for a minute. And Brexit is going to be a very difficult event for Ireland. But don't think about Ireland as a unique country with respect to this. There are over 900,000 Poles living in England. There are only 350,000 Irish people living in England. That means, from a priority point of view, the two major groups before the Irish in the United Kingdom are Poles, who are European Union citizens, and people from India. So the Irish have this prior assumption that they're going to be the priority negotiation position with respect to the United Kingdom, even though Mrs. May has mentioned that as part of her discussions in the Making a Global Britain announcement. Ireland is not going to be the number one priority, not in Brussels, not in London. That being said, Ireland does have a unique position. It has a unique land border in Northern Ireland. It has a unique position with respect to trade. An awful lot of our trade is still with the United Kingdom. Our tastes and preferences are similar. Our regulatory and legal frameworks are similar. And if you think that the Government of Ireland Act or the Republic of Ireland Act will save us, you're wrong. Those were superseded over 40 years ago as part of the European treaties. So there's going to be an awful lot of basic work that will have to be done here in Dublin to ensure a smooth transition into a post-Brexit world. And I think it's fitting to go back to an original line about the situation between England and Ireland when the Normans first came here in 1169. And Gerald of Wales, in his conquest of Ireland, said that the Irish were a race of which the only stable and reliable trait is that they're being unstable and unreliable. That unreliability, that instability that is part of the Irish psyche will enable the country to respond and respond actively and creatively to the challenges that face it. Britain is going to be leaving the customs union. That is going to be the single most traumatic event for the Irish economy in the 21st century. On top of that, they're talking about introducing a 17% rate of tax. Already, Ireland's policy of a tax-based industrial attraction is not going to be sustainable. Not only is the UK thinking about moving to a 17% rate of tax, the United States, under Secretary of Commerce Wilbur Ross, has already announced a desire to move to a 15% rate of corporate tax. That level of tax competition will make it deeply difficult for Ireland to sustain the number of businesses that it has located here in the future. And if there are further changes made by the European Union with respect to the common consolidated corporate tax base, we could see the income from pharmaceutical activities in Ireland, the revenues going to the Department of Finance, reduced by 40%. So we have to start thinking. We have to think radically. Industrial policy, the industrial policy that we were left with by T.K. Whitaker, is an industrial policy of the 20th century. We are beginning, and we do it here in Trinity all the time, of moving into a knowledge-led, research-led, modern 21st century economy. This is not an economy which is based upon competitive taxation rates. This is not an economy which is based upon location of headquarters offices. It's an economy based on the power of ideas and the power of knowledge and the networking ability between different countries. And that's where Ireland comes into its own. And that's what we're trying to do here, and this is what makes firms successful. The Department of Jobs, Enterprise and Innovation has highlighted that the firms that have survived the crisis are the firms that are research active and firms that are heavily engaged with high human capital. That's the future. And that's how we will survive Brexit and how we will survive the economic consequences of Mr. Trump. The reality of the next few years is uncertain. And as Andrew Haldane, the chief economist of the Bank of England, has made it very clear, the economics profession has had its Michael Fish moment. We are not ones to be standing up before you and give you grand pronouncements on what the future will be. But what we can say is that the conditions at the moment are changing. And we are not living in an era of change, we are living in a change of era. The post-1945 order is reshaping itself, and we're seeing that in real time. And it is that instability and unreliability that Gerard of Wales wrote about in 1170 that will be the ability of the Irish to survive into the 21st century.